Good morning. I hope you've been doing well. Come on with us to Matthew chapter 5 today. In Matthew chapter 5, in the Sermon on the Mount, I want to talk about a certain idea. Jesus repeatedly goes back and forth and he says, "You have heard that it was said to those of old." And then he comes back and he says, "But I say." And you have a contrast going on. To think about what Jewish society was like in the synagogues, for example, all the rabbis would basically give their opinions about what scriptures meant. Well, the Lord was different. He was not just another rabbi. So he says, "You have heard that it was said, but I say." And they had some religious preconceptions. We'll put it that way. Some things just needed to be clarified. Some things needed to be refuted throughout the sermon. You can study it for yourself. But they had some preconceptions. And the things that they had heard, they were going to get in the way of them hearing the Lord. And I want you to think about that idea because it's the same for us. Their preconceptions, they were going to end up preventing them from hearing what the Lord had to say. And that's how it is with us as well. For example, people have religious preconceptions. They have religious ideas, and the Lord comes along and he says something different. And people refuse to listen. When the Lord says, "You may have heard that, but I'm telling you something different." And people have religious preconceptions, and it causes problems. People also, other people that they listen to, right? You have heard that it was said. It's not just religion, it's also family. People will listen to family. They'll listen to mommy, they'll listen to daddy, they'll listen to anybody else in their family. And then the Lord comes along and he says, "I'm going to tell you something different." And they have a lot of trouble listening to Jesus. It could also be society. A lot of folks just listen to society, whether we're talking about academia, whether we're talking about the media, whether we're talking about sports figures, whatever we're talking about. A lot of folks, they listen to society. And then Jesus comes along and he says, "But I say." And people stick their fingers in their ears and they don't listen. What it really comes down to is people listen to themselves. People will just flat out say, "Well, I have always thought that." And they have always just listened to themselves. And Jesus comes along and he says, "Well, I'm going to tell you something different." And they don't want to hear it a lot of times. In Matthew chapter 7, at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, notice what it says. In Matthew 7 at verse 28, it says, "And so it was when Jesus had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as the scribes." They were astonished. Now, whether they believed, that's a whole nother question. They were just astonished because he wasn't going along like the rabbis were. This isn't about opinions. This is about authority. And that's the thing. Any preconceptions that we have, what they can do is they can deafen us to the Lord's authority. And we need to lay them aside. And we need to just listen to what the Lord has to say. Because that's the only way we're truly going to follow him. That's the only way we're going to be pleasing to him. That's the only way that we are going to be healed, is if we have ears to hear. We need to turn to him. We need to listen to his authority. Hope you enjoyed this study. God bless you. Be a blessing to others. We do hope to see you tomorrow morning.